So Paul mentions twice to sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. But go back to the Gospels themselves. It amazes me how much of the ministry of Jesus is punctuated by references to the Psalms. I mean, if you take his mother's song, which is called the Magnificat, Mary's Magnificat, that is basically like she has lifted verses from all over the Psalms and woven them together into this one new song that she has. It's a beautiful expression of the heart of what the Psalms are all about. Or if you go to the Song of Simeon, which is called the Nunc Dimittis, Lord, let your servant depart in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation, that he sings in the temple. That's very much like the Psalms. And then, of course, when you get to Holy Week and all the things that are happening with Palm Sunday and then Jesus instituting the Lord's Supper and Good Friday, over and over, you have the Psalms forming the basis of what Jesus does. And rightly so, because remember what Jesus says to his disciples? This is at the very end of Luke's Gospel. He's died, he's been buried, he's been resurrected. He appears to his disciples. And he says to them basically, were you guys not paying attention? Didn't you know that everything that's written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms had to be fulfilled? Everything written about me in Moses, Genesis through Deuteronomy, and the prophets, but in the Jewish designation, the prophets was a big collection, not just like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, but Joshua and Judges and Samuel and Kings. Those were considered part of the prophets. So in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. So the Psalms are prophesying the work of Jesus in many various ways. But let's think for a minute about how the Psalms aren't just prophesying certain events, like Psalm 22 and the crucifixion, or Psalm 41, where Judas lifts up his heel against Jesus, or Psalm 118, when Jesus rides into Jerusalem with the singing of hosannas. Let's think also about how these prayers are the prayers of Jesus. Now, you might be somewhat familiar with thinking along these lines. I mean, I quoted Psalm 22, right? We're familiar with understanding Jesus praying that on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Or maybe some of the other Psalms you're familiar with in that respect as well. But what about all the Psalms? Sometimes the question comes up, well, how many of the Psalms are Messianic? In other words, how many of the Psalms are in one way or another talking about the Messiah? Let me think. I can do the math pretty quick. 150. That's how many Messianic Psalms there are. 150. Because every single one of these, in an indirect or a direct way, is speaking of God and his people. And Christ is at the very heart of God and his people, because Christ is God in the flesh. And his people are his body. What is the church? The body of Christ.